Hey everyone, welcome to our live stream today from my home here in Boston, Massachusetts. We're going to be talking about working from home but together and using MATLAB and how we can do that basically. So I'm Heather. I'm a product manager, product marketing manager in the data science area in MATLAB. And a lot of people ask about how to use MATLAB in the cloud, how to work together, how to use source control with MATLAB. So that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And I added some of my information here if you want to share some of this information outside of YouTube as well. So just to like, we're also, I want to really make this very interactive. So please type any of your questions in the chat. And we're going to take some breaks and answer questions. Usually I have kind of a sidekick here. I'm really missing my friend Connell or Hisham, but I'll be okay. Somebody will jump in with some questions. So this is just kind of an outline of what we're going to talk about. And again, we can kind of focus more about, on the different topics that people are interested in. I heard at least Joanna is interested in using source control. So that's great. So we can work on some of our projects together and we can practice. So we'll talk a little bit about accessing MATLAB. I know there, especially with the current situation, there have been a lot of questions about how to get access if you don't have MATLAB, say, installed on your desktop. So we'll talk through some of those, and then we'll show some really cool features for managing really big projects with, if you've used Simulink projects before, this is the same. So it's MATLAB, Simulink, all different kinds of code. It's really useful. And then last but not least, basically my favorite topic, and sounds like we'll spend a lot of time on that, is using source control. And basically, what is the workflow? We'll kind of assume that people are pretty new to it. They kind of have heard about it before, but we'll go through an example. And you can even pull from my repos and follow along as we go. So again, make it very interactive. Don't forget to ask questions. I'm not going to show slides. First, I'm going to show my desktop. I want to just jump into accessing MATLAB. So again, a lot of people have asked recently about this because they may have may not, if you're in a university and you're used to going into the computer lab or something and you don't have it on your desktop and suddenly you had to leave, how do you access this? So especially if you're a student, you will have access to MATLAB online. And it's basically just MATLAB through a web browser, just like, PowerPoint online or, other kinds of apps like that. So this is the address. It's just matlab.mathworks.com. And you use your MathWorks login. So if you don't have one, just go to the website and sign up. We'll also put a link in the chat for how to do, or how to get access to it if you don't already, and if you're not sure. So again, I said most student licenses will have access to this, and then certain other licenses will too. But there's good information on the site, on the website about that. Oh, it's not always dark looking like this. This is just my Firefox browser preferences. So this is what it would look like in a normal world. But fun fact, you can just dark mode it using your browser preferences. So it basically is regular MATLAB. There are some features, just as you might expect, that aren't there. It's not absolutely everything from the desktop, but most of the things that you need to do in MATLAB are A-OK. So a couple kind of cool things that I really like about MATLAB Online is this ability to share. So that's one thing that we're talking about, is working from home together. So a lot of times you're not just working alone, hopefully. You are, collaborating on software or on MATLAB problems together, right? So a really cool way to do this, a super easy way, especially if you're using MATLAB Online, is to use this link ability. So for example, Joanna in the chat and I came up with this cool app, and we created a link so that we could share it with anybody. So we gave this at a big sales kickoff thing, and we had hundreds of people using it. So all I have to do is right click on the directory, and I just hit share, and I can either invite people like by email, or I can create a link, which I already did, but it should pop up with something, hopefully. Cool. So I will copy this and I will put it in the chat. Well, I put it in this other chat and someone else will put it in the chat. But basically now you can go ahead and use it. So everything that I'm able to do, you'll be able to do. So you can start the game just like I'm doing. But again, I think this is really helpful, especially even if you're a professor and you want everybody to be able to access your homework assignments, things like that. Within the that link option that you saw, you also have the ability to have people with either give them write edit or write or read only kind of access. So I won't dwell too much on this. I haven't looked at this in quite a while. And it's probably not using the right webcam. I'll probably screw things up. So let's just get out of that. So let me go back to MATLAB Online. So it should keep everything current too. So had I been working on something and my browser crashed, I use Firefox. It's really well tested in, well, I use beta versions of Firefox, so I don't imagine they're testing on all these weird things that I'm doing. But anyways, you can, if it does crash and you're working on something, you'll have the same stuff in your workspace. Your code will be completely maintained. So that's really cool. And it basically again kind of looks and feels just like you would see in regular MATLAB. So I'll just run this just to convince you that I'm not lying. And what's kind of cool is if you have a really bad computer, I have quite a few around my house. And it's kind of nice because then I don't have to have a MATLAB installed. These are really nice machines on the back end from Amazon, and they're, we're using those to do the deep learning and things like that. So it's actually really handy. All right, so that kind of covers, I'll pause for a moment to see if there are any questions about MATLAB Online. I don't know how I'm going to know about the questions. A voice, perhaps? All right. That's why I'm wearing the headphones. I have the studio is in my ear. All right, so pretty straightforward. Again, you can always try it out, and if you are able to get that link, you can try out the code that we shared. So I also wanted to talk about the cloud options, right? So sometimes you might want to, let me just pull this up right here. So, a lot of times we get questions about, hey, I want to use MATLAB in the cloud. There are a lot of different ways what different definitions of what in the cloud means. Sometimes you basically want to have, you want to just basically use MATLAB just like you normally would, and so that we have options for. So I'm showing the MathWorks reference architectures, and these, if you click through, they'll go through the, it'll basically provision a stack for you, and it'll provision a VM, and it'll give you everything you need for MATLAB. So we have these for AWS and Azure. And then also, depending on what you kind of want to do, that again is if you want a full desktop version, basically. So, there are other times where, you don't want the whole desktop, you just want to run a bit of code. I mentioned, maybe you have sort of a weak machine. My laptop does have a GPU, fortunately, but not everybody's does. And so, maybe you want to get some GPUs and run your deep learning models on that. So you can always just get extra resources to run your code. And then finally, like talking about sharing, depending on how you're collaborating together, you may want to just serve up your data or your functions or your models with like a REST API. And so then other people don't even have to have MATLAB at all. So you could use MATLAB production server, and then again, you don't have to host it, on your own machine. You can just, click through. I'll click through this basically to show you what it kind of looks like. I'm not going to actually set one up because I always am in trouble with IT. Sorry, Eric, if you're listening, because I do these things all the time. So for example, it gives you the requirements. This is also one thing I love about these. It's super easy to follow the instructions if you are not very familiar with, server architectures and cloud stuff. So, basically, once we started doing these things, I wasn't very familiar with it, and I just followed instructions, Googled, and figured it out. So don't be scared, I guess, is what I'll say. Do be scared, though, if you're adding extra dollars to IT. Yep. Okay. Cool. So I'm hearing some questions just in case you heard me just stop abruptly. So that's good. I want to make sure we answer some questions before we move on to anything else. So a couple that we'll probably get to. So, GitHub questions. Also, I'm looking at another screen, if you're wondering. A couple good questions about collaboration. Yeah, we're going to talk, actually, we're going to show an example using GitHub. So we'll show how to do that from MATLAB in, probably 5 or 10 minutes. And then there was a question about embedded coder in MATLAB Online. That is a very good question. I don't know if anybody is on from the MATLAB Online teams. If you don't mind jumping in, I don't think so. There are certain things, although it looks like I can. It's unclear. So it depends on what you need to do afterwards. There are certain apps that will, if they're written in Java instead of JavaScript or something, it might not show up. And then depending on, you don't have a lot of choice on the back end of MATLAB Online. So if it's really dependent on accessing that coder thing, like the device that you're trying to put it on, you can check into let me see here. There are add-ons. So there may be, again, depending on what you're trying to do, what kind of device you're trying to hook into, you may be able to get the add-ons for the right libraries to talk to it. But that would be something I can definitely check in on that, or have somebody check on that. That's from MathWorks in the chat. So very good question though. And I think that was the only one. One was one must have an active license account to share. I don't actually know. So the sharing is through MATLAB Drive. That's another one to check on for sure, because I don't want to lie on a record. But one thing is MATLAB Drive, you just need a MathWorks account. So you don't necessarily need a desktop license version or anything like that, similar to like Dropbox or something. So there is likely that you shouldn't need to attach it to something like that. It would just be to run or to edit the code. Then you would obviously need the license. But we can make sure that is true. Yeah, I think that was all for. Okay, one was asking about installing different toolboxes. So whenever you're using MATLAB Online, it will the toolboxes that you have associated with your account or your license will be available. Again, some of the functionality may or may not work. A lot of the things are apps. It's like a lot of decisions of like, is this another tab? Like, how does this all work? And we have to hear the demand for it. So it's also very good if you if you try something and you don't see it. Definitely let us know, because that really helps us prioritize, what people really expect or need from MATLAB Online. So very good questions so far. Keep it coming. I will also just add to that you can add the add-ons. So those are the MathWorks licenses that I mentioned. But say you wanted to, like my selfie stick is like in the way. So, say you wanted to use something from the community, which is awesome. It's another really great way to collaborate. You can find a lot of these examples and other people's toolboxes here. So, you can also install those through MATLAB Online. All right, good. So I just wanted to touch a little bit more on the cloud stuff. Again, because we get asked this a lot, and we have some resources out there, but there are a lot of kind of subtle things that people will ask. So I wanted to give an opportunity for people to ask questions. So this gives some information. Again, this is basically, if you're not interested in MATLAB Online, you're more interested in a full desktop MATLAB, but on a VM, or using the resources for your computations. So I think the trickiest part, at least for me, is accessing your IT information, like your AWS or your Azure account, especially if you are associated with a large corporation. You may have to get approval or become really good friends. I think that's important in data science, is if you have really good friends with IT, because you'll talk to them a lot. So that's something that you might need to just know up front, or you can create like a trial account, a student account. Oftentimes they have a lot of options for that. So again, it kind of just goes through the instructions pretty much step by step. And then it gives you basically a button that you can use. No, that's not the button. Here's the button. So, you can choose where you want to set it up and then launch the stack. So likely I have the wrong login information here, so I'll move on with that. But it will just give you a couple of options for, the stack name that you're going to associate it with, some of your other details like your account name, how you want to provision these things, how many cores you want, things like that. So, again, there are good videos for those if you want to kind of walk through those step by step on our YouTube channel. So I'll pause again for some questions in case we have anything in the cloud area. I don't see anything yet. And I will just bring back the MathWorks reference architectures page. So again, this is where you would get it. Another thing that's really cool if you're into this stuff, we have a Dockerfile now, so you can Dockerize. And so this is helpful if you are, say you're sharing things with colleagues that are very dependent. So you have, MATLAB versions and you have different Python versions and they all have to talk together and you have certain Java dependencies and you don't want somebody else to have to set that up. I'm talking about something that I currently have to do. So what I can do is create a Docker container, which is basically like a VM to a user, and then they have everything they need. They can just use it as is. So those are helpful, and those are really helpful in production, not just for kind of a desktop interface. So just wanted to point out a couple of those while I'm waiting for some questions. Let's see. There are some questions. I'm not sure about the context of it, but is Simulink available? So I think I'll just talk to both of these. Yes, so you can simulate in MATLAB Online. I'm not sure. I don't want to promise anything, so I don't know exactly as far as the whole palette of Simulink, the Simulink interface and all that stuff. I'm not sure how much is integrated, but I know that there's a Simulink on-ramp that uses MATLAB Online, and you are able to call the sim functions and things like that. And again, we can get more information from the MATLAB Online team. Yeah, and we can also, we'll provide information in the chat while we're streaming, and we can also put things in the comments too that I need to check up on later. All right, so a couple other questions. Can we set access levels on the scripts like editing or viewing? Yeah, that's one really nice thing about these is that you can, where did that go? Let's see. So let me, maybe I should put her name. I'll just share it with myself. This is one of the things to show. So I think there. So you can edit or view, and then whenever you do a link, you can do the same. So one thing with the link, if you have many people editing, it might be challenging to keep everybody on track. So it might be a good idea to just have them copy and paste, or use something like source control, which we'll talk about soon. All right, so it doesn't look like we have too much more in the way of cloud or MATLAB Online questions. So I'll go ahead and move on to the source control stuff, which is really fun for me. And I want to start out talking about MATLAB projects. So I saw somebody commented on the pump project. This is something I've been working on for about a year, maybe more. And it's a really big project where there are a bunch of us working on it together. And I've been doing the machine learning part and some of the streaming architecture. So eventually, I don't know, I don't need to tell you all that much about it, but just to give you a little bit of an idea of how many pieces come into it. It's a Simulink model that creates data for pumps, and then I'm predicting whether it's going to fail and when, and then we want to do this live real time. So, and we also want a dashboard and like a front end. So there's all these different moving pieces. So we decided to use what's called a project, a MATLAB project or a Simulink project, as it used to be known as. But this is what it looks like. And I've set up this project. What's really cool is you might have noticed it said starting Simulink. And it ran code that I needed to set everything up for people that are sharing this. So for example, I have more limited knowledge about Simulink. So if somebody had something special that needed to happen, they could write code that loads these Simulink things that I don't know about, and then I don't have to worry about it. It just does that in the project. So it's really cool. So I'll just show you a couple of these things. Let's see. So for example, so these are the ones that have a little shortcut. So you can show, this is just making things easy. So like this is an app that I have with it, and this is a test that we want to maybe run every day. So you can, differentiate those. And let me find, here we go. Oh, it's probably easier to do that. So this is the kind of the thing I was talking about that's really handy. A lot of times when you're working in MATLAB, you have files that you need to run, mat files that need to be loaded, things that need to go on the path, really importantly. And maybe somebody is very new to MATLAB, they don't know about these things. You can create startup files that will just run automatically, and then shut down files if you want to remove certain things. And then in this case, we had starting Simulink. That way I don't have to, think about it as I go. I can just get all that done. And then the path, again, especially if somebody is somewhat, new to MATLAB, they might not know about, how the path works and how many things, how you need to access things. So you can add all of these things to the path for them, and it'll just be added immediately whenever you start it up. As you notice, there's more added here. And also, yeah, it just helps to, oh yeah, and whenever you close the project or you move out of it, it'll take it off the path. So that way you don't have conflicts elsewhere. So it's a really, really handy way to work together. And it was also helpful because we had people working on code in different languages, and we could stay on the same page. I had, colleagues working in Simulink, and we could all, be on the same page. So I will hint at this right now. I will pause for a moment to see if we have questions about projects, but you notice that this is nice, easy kind of GitHub access for, especially people that aren't necessarily used to it, may not want to go to the command line. You can just click a button and see some of the information. And so we'll lead into talking about that soon. And I'll just see what kind of questions we have. All right. So there's one, can I change my MATLAB code to another language? Yes. So there are a couple of different ways to do this. Sometimes you want to call your code from another language that is capable through our reference architectures and through our software or APIs. But then also, if you wanted to create, GPU CUDA code for GPUs, you could use GPU coder, C coder. The compilers can create Java code. So there are a lot of different ways to do that. The other couple of things I see, updating different versions with a university license. So one thing, obviously you're kind of locked into whatever your university is doing, but the nice thing about MATLAB Online is that it always uses the latest version. So that's really handy, especially if your company isn't up to date on something or you have different machines that have to have different versions. The MATLAB Online will always be the recent one. So there were a couple other questions about adding the path or how to add things to the path. There's an add path command. You can just do it that way. I haven't typed anything in a while, so it's, oh wow, it's probably really loud too. I have a mechanical keyboard with LEDs. So, if you wanted to add something, you can do it like that, or just right click in MATLAB. And so that'll work. Or again, if you have the projects, you can, do it here from the project path. All right, so I will lead into GitHub now, because I know there are lots of questions about that. And not just GitHub, all sorts of source control options, SVN, things like that. I wanted to just jump into the doc, which is very handily the first shortcut here. And some of this will be in our software development tools. Oh, I'll also mention the language interfaces. That was what I was trying to say when I just said APIs. So, that's one of the ways that you can, connect other languages. So within software development tools, you can find more about projects. There's also more videos on that. And then testing. Maybe we'll come back and do another one on that. And then source control. So this gives you an idea of the different types if you're using SVN or Git. And then there are other options. I think there are like more customized ones. And if you see something that isn't here, I saw there was a couple of questions on detailed types of source control methods. So, definitely reach out to us if you don't see it here. It's usually possible to sync up, especially whenever you're trying to interface with different languages and things like that. You might find something on GitHub already or on file or the file exchange. So give that a shot too. So just kind of start from scratch. We'll use GitHub since we get a lot of questions about GitHub and I use it frequently, so I know more about that one. There are some nice examples in here. I won't find them right now. You can look, but it goes through kind of the workflow or like the process, and we'll go through that as well. But one thing you want to do in the beginning is just download the installer basically so that you can hook into things easily, right? So you can always interact with Git through the web, basically. So I'll go to GitHub. Oh, that's my picture. And let's just pick a different repository here. It's my Baby Yoda finder. We won't use that. Here we go. All right, so you can always download from GitHub. Just no big deal. Download with a zip file, or you can look at the code through the web browser. So depending on what you want to do, no big deal. The nice thing is that you're obviously the value of using this is that lots of people can work on it together, and you can track. I'll get into this more whenever we have the example. But it'll help track, the timing of whenever you're making changes and your colleagues making changes, and you can resolve those conflicts really easily. Well, a lot easier than you would be able to previously if you had, version _5, version _6, et cetera. It's much harder. So I just wanted to note that. So we'll use this as an example. So you guys could just follow along, really. And again, you may have to do some setup steps if you don't already have Git installed through this process here. And again, it's not too big of a deal. And if not, or if you have access, you can follow along. So I'm gonna do this in MATLAB. I'll go to a new directory. Let's just find something. And what we can do is go to source control. So it's just a right click from MATLAB or from the current folder browser and go to manage files. So this is how we can set it up. So a lot of people will use, I actually frequently use the command line for Git, and there's a lot of really cool cheat sheets and resources out there for the commands. But again, if you're getting started, it's a lot easier sometimes to just use an app. And I think for me, especially at first, and even now, I get really confused with the terminology, like pulling and fetching. Those really seem like the same thing to me. So I think the app is really helpful to, get some of the context around it if you're getting started. So here's some of the options. And I want to put in where I want to clone from. Actually, I have a slide. I don't like to show slides, but I think this is helpful. Okay, so let's step back a minute. So you want to access some things. You want to access the repo that I showed. So it's about earthquakes, and I, created it, but a whole bunch of stuff about earthquakes you want to add to it. So you want to basically clone it, and then you can, fork branch so that you're not on the master. And then the process would be to, change your code. So this would be the current code in the repo. You pull it, you create a branch, and then, you have the code. Again, we'll show this in a minute. And then you make some nice updates. You notice that it gives you an indication, this green little circle means that things are up to date. The blue square, I suppose, means that this has been edited. And if you're ready, you want to commit. You want to give a message of what you just did. And then you can submit a merge request to the main developer on the project. And then that person can review, and then they can do, a diff and see like what changes that you made, run a test if they like, and then accept the merge, and then you're good to go. And so that's kind of one of the values is, a lot of people can be working on these things at the same time. Every time you open up MATLAB to, look at your code, you can just fetch it, get the latest updates, and then, go about your business. So there are a lot of good resources out there for general GitHub workflows. Also, like on the GitHub website, they're really good, just kind of what all these what all the terminology means. So I won't spend a lot of time on that, although if you like, I can do that another time. So I'm going to clone with HTTPS, just copy and paste this basically. Doesn't matter too much. It's just if you're doing it from the command line, you want the other option. So here we go. I just copied and pasted it, basically. So it's the same thing you see here, but just Git. And I can, let me get in MATLAB here. I want to add a new folder. Okay, so it gives me a note that it does not exist yet. So I just am putting all this stuff in a new folder. And there it is. So it might take a minute if it had a lot of data. This example is just pulling through a web API, but it has everything that you saw on the website. So, that's except for this really cool screenshot. So I have my, folders, I have that app, same thing, right? So, conveniently, I also have a project. So let me open that up and get everything started. And let's just take a look at it because I want to show what things might look like. I'm not going to do this now, but I'll show you if you want to on your own, you could, wait, there we go. Branch or fork this. I guess you would fork it. It's harder from mine because I don't have that option. But so that way you're not, changing the, master copy. So, again, there's a lot more info. I don't want to spend too long on that. I didn't want to go over an hour for this live stream. But a lot of good info on some of the different ways that you might want to, differences between forking, branching, those kinds of things. So let's just run this and I'll make some updates. I'm just reading earthquake data from around the world over the past 24 hours and doing some visualizations. So recently someone actually told me that geoscientists would be upset seeing this example because they use a log scale. So I might actually change that now. Maybe I can just do it in one of the plots. Let's see. All right, I don't know. All right, I can't find anything to change right now. I'm losing my mind suddenly. But let's just make a change. I'll just add a comment or something. So whenever I'm not being watched, I will add the log scale to this from my friend Lauren. But for now, we can just add hello world, and I'll just even close Control-C out of that to make it stop, even though those are really cool visualizations. And now in case you're somewhere that just had an earthquake recently, get out of town. But don't. Stay 6 feet away from each other. All right, anyway, we won't go into that. Okay, so I made an update. Right, so I just said hello world. It's really stupid, but whatever. It's for example, and you notice that there's a little blue box letting me know that I made a change. So if we go back to our source control menu, there are now some options besides manage files since I'm in, the world of Git. So I have these options. I mentioned fetching. That gives you the up-to-date. I'll just do that for fun. You see, it's processing, not for fun, but that's good practice. And if I mentioned about branches, I think this is helpful. I don't want to get into a really complicated example, but sometimes you have multiple people working. You would be able to see their branches, see what changes they made, and you can see side-by-side differences. So this is handy whenever, maybe I can come back later and do a video about, more complicated situations where you have a lot of conflicts. So helpful to see, like again, with an app, although I like the command line too. So I want to just mention, now let's say I'm happy with this. It's embarrassing, but whatever. I just added hello world. I want to commit my changes and I can add a comment. So you always want to add a comment as thorough but brief as possible, just so your colleagues know what happened, especially, they can do a diff or a merge, but, just add some context. So I just, also lets me know later that this was just an example. I didn't make any weird changes. I just added some stupid comment. So for me right now, it's green because it's sort of up to date, but I still haven't updated anything yet. So if you would go to, well, just trust me, you wouldn't see any changes, not yet. Because we still need to we need to merge. And in this case, I can just push the updates. So I sort of cheated a little bit since I'm the owner. I didn't show the putting in a merge request and branching properly. But what you would do is go to, I need to find one where I'm not actually the owner, but go to the branch, and then you'll be able to put in a merge request. So they'll be able, so you see pull requests here. So you would have a different option. And then you can just, request, and then you can write details, and then I could accept it, and then it would be updated. So again, we can come back to that more complicated kinds of cases later on too. All right, so again, for me, it's relatively easy. For now, I can just push my updates. Oh man, let's see. So we won't do that for the next 10 years. And I also don't want to just look up my password through my Firefox because you'll see it. But at that point, the merges or the pull would have, the push would have happened, and the changes would have been made in the front end. So it's really the same for you. If you want to do this, you would just go create a fork it. You can create a branch of your own if you want to, do side development, and not necessarily push to the main. But again, you would branch. You would do the same exact thing that I did. It's just that you would do it in your branch. You would commit, make your comments, and then go to your repo, put in the merge request via the web, and then the owner will accept the changes, hopefully, or tell you no. Or, again, maybe you need to do different updates or something, but, you'll be able to see all of that, in the merging, in the diff and merge sort of process. So that's basically the process. I will pause to see what kind of questions we have. Let's see. Some are kind of specific, so I'll try to just find ones that are related to the topics that we talked about. Let's see. Oh, so one that was online, it was one, is it possible to run scripts at regular time intervals? For example, analyzing data from ThinkSpeak. So a couple different ways you could do that. One, the pump thing I was showing you, one thing I did, I pulled every second. I just pulled from, somewhere. We could do that with the earthquake data. We could put like a pause with, one in parentheses, and it would pause and just pull every second. I think, depending on what you're trying to do, it might be better to do that outside and, run it repeatedly through the cloud. You have a lot of options for triggering things like that. And also, if you have parallel computing toolbox, you have some capabilities for scheduling as well through there. Let's see. A lot of questions about migrating to newer versions. One of the things that is really helpful to, I can't give much advice. I'll always, I like to use the latest version, obviously. Those are the latest and greatest. But one of the things that is helpful is to run, there's oh my gosh, I can't think of what it's called now. Hopefully it's in this window. I'll think of it. I'll look, I can't think of it now, but it's an upgrade advisor. So it's for MATLAB code. So it'll flag anything that might change or any functions that have changed over the release time that you're looking for. It's really, really helpful. I can put in a link into the chat later on, or the the comments. So another question is the projects section integrated with GitHub. Yes, so that's really handy, especially, again, you have these large teams making all these changes. You can have everything on Git, and that's also a really good way to track them. So you put your project on GitHub, basically. And so that's what when I pulled the earthquake ones, I also pulled the project. So it got the right, file directories and things like that. And then it's really handy because all of the, keep closing that. All of the functionality is right here. So you don't have to even right click. You can just, okay, let me just refresh this. I need to fetch the updates, let me get the branches. So, again, it's really helpful to have everything right there. Especially if you have colleagues that, aren't as familiar, they can just try it out. All right, a couple others. Some toolboxes are only available to academic accounts. If you have different, if you want to be able to try different toolboxes or access different ones, the easiest way to do that is to get a trial, basically. I'm not sure how the student licenses work, honestly, for adding toolboxes. Generally, if it's anything that's a community toolbox, no problem whatsoever. I'm not sure about how the licensing works, is what I mean. So it would be good to reach out. You can always put in a tech support request, or any of the emails that you see on a website. We can check it out for you. But again, I can talk a lot about MATLAB, not a lot about licensing or anything like that. So a couple others is MATLAB going to support the new C++ language invented by Intel? Not sure exactly. I would just note that we often, are up on whatever is latest and greatest, and if not being implemented, it's often researched. So that would be something really good to check the release notes to see if there's something or when something is introduced. So good question. There might be some more information out there. I'm not 100% sure. There are a couple other ones. How many developers could work through source control at the same time? Good question. I believe in theory, millions. There are a lot of things like Linux is built, like everything that, a lot of things that we use all the time is built, on GitHub or through source control, and many, many, many developers contribute. I think the challenging thing is when you have a lot of developers, managing branching and things like that can get challenging. So it's helpful if people know what to do. So if you're starting up a project like that and you have folks that might not be as familiar, it would be really helpful to share some of the resources to what these things mean, how to branch, have some kind of training, and then it'll make it a lot easier on the end, so then you wouldn't have more noise from accidental pushes and things like that. But yeah, in theory, millions. So it just, again, it's a little bit challenging to manage at the end of the day. But one thing I like to do also is I'll pull a lot of repos and just try a bunch of stuff, and I never really intend necessarily on contributing back. I mean, that's not necessarily good practice. I'd like to contribute back to the community, plenty of things on GitHub and File Exchange, but for me, I would be nervous, of course, to contribute to Linux and feel that I was going to break something. Obviously, I'm very confident in their testing, and they're not just going to accept my changes. But it's really nice because you can also just pull from those repos and try things out if you wanted to, kind of advance your skills. So if you noticed, one of mine, I was working on the Dockerfile because I was trying to learn more about, Docker. So that was something I did recently, and I definitely did not intend to break the thing that we did. But it's been a really good learning experience. So I definitely intend. There's no I don't get in trouble for anything. So you can do all these things in practice, and not have to worry about it. So feel free to practice with mine. You can submit merge requests and I don't know, conflicts. That's another thing that is nice. Like if people can put comments and issues, if something's not working, so it's helpful. But yeah, go ahead and practice and do whatever you like. Hopefully I get 100 merge requests today and somebody will update the log scale for my earthquakes. I will check a couple more. Can you use MATLAB online for CI? Good question. I'm not sure. I don't necessarily see reasons why you couldn't. I have to, that might be one we come back to in the comments. But in theory, I was just looking to see if I had a slide on any of this. Not particularly, but just in case people were wondering, CI is continuous integration. So this is a lot when you're working on these large projects. This is really helpful because you can put your tests in with the project, and then every day or every hour run the tests continuously, basically. And that's a really good way to manage these requests. That's actually good. I should have mentioned that in the beginning. Thank you for that question. So I'm not sure. It would be good to check the GitHub. So we also, if you're using Jenkins, Travis, those kinds of things, we have hook-ins for those. So depending on your CI system, it may or may not be easy. I guess that's the thing. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work, but that would be something to follow up on for sure. And I'll get back to you in the chat. All right. Anything else here that I guess we're going longer than I wanted to, but I guess that's okay if people are still asking questions. All right. Yeah, there seem to be a lot of assorted kind of comments and questions. Please let us know what you want to hear next. So we're hoping to do this every week, and I can talk about anything really, or invite somebody else to talk about things that I don't know anything about. So please put it in the comments, put it in the chat. It would be great to hear what you want to learn about next. And I definitely encourage you to try these things out. Like I said, don't be afraid, just do it. And if you have a friend that wants to practice, or you want to use mine as practice, I think that's the biggest thing, is just kind of getting your hands dirty, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Trust me, the MATLAB, somebody will probably not, accept any weird code that probably doesn't work. And yeah, so I'll just end it there. I don't want to go over the time allotted. So I'll come back into the comments with any follow-ups, and really thank you for listening and for paying attention. It was great having you here so we can work from home together. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.